Good day. Today is September 18th, 2024. I am Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I am joined, as always, by Western Standard senior opinion editor, Nigel Hannaford.
I was going to say, how many opinion editors do we have?
I was referring to you as a senior.
I see. There's no pension plan, but anyway.
It was a good save. I was actually mixing it up with then Cory's title, senior Alberta columnist, Cory Morgan. I was mixing it up, but instead I just made an old joke.
Well, I'm happy to be here too.
No joke like an old joke.
Ah, yes.
Doesn't get old. All right. We've got a great show. Just tons of stuff. We're going to be talking now that Jagmeet Singh has ripped up his agreement with Justin Trudeau. We're heading for an election, right? Right? No, we're not, because there's a new coalition in town. The Bloc-Liberal and the Liberals doing a dance. The Bloc will be supporting the Liberal government by voting that they have confidence in Justin Trudeau and the government next week when Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party's non-confidence motion comes up. So we're going to be talking about the dance the Bloc-Liberal and the Liberal government are doing and just how much this just might cost the rest of us outside of Canada, the ROC. Now, this is... I don't know how to talk about this one with a straight face. They did it again. Man, the Mossad, I'm guessing it's got to be Mossad. The Israelis have executed what has got to be one of the most interesting covert operations in world history, targeting a bunch of Hamas terrorist bosses. Well, they didn't use drone strikes. They didn't shoot them. They didn't snipe them. They sold them a bunch of modified pagers. And simultaneously, they went boom, castrating many terrorists across the Middle East region, particularly in Lebanon, all at once. And, well...
Say it. What's the new Hamas slogan?
From the liver to the knees. I mean, like that title does right. That headline writes itself. From the liver to the knees. So we're going to be talking about that. Speaking of interesting body parts being rearranged, Alberta MLA Jennifer Johnson, she was the Conservative nominee in the constituency of Lacombe-Panoka. She made some comments during the last provincial election. Was not allowed to sit with the Conservatives. Her comments were deemed by some to be transphobic. They were, at the very least, they were indelicate. And so she's been doing penance since the last election. She's had to sit as an independent MLA, supposed to go through some kind of sensitivity training around trans things and all that. And a biological male who identifies as a woman. We're going to play the video for her, but he very publicly tried to bully her and say things that she knows is scientifically and factually false. And this has caught the attention of J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series. And it's become a global phenomenon now, the kind of trans bullying of this Alberta MLA into trying to force her to lie publicly. And it seems to have blown up in her face quite spectacularly. And, we're gonna start a new segment today, Parting Shots. Some final thoughts from myself, Nigel, Cory, that maybe don't have to get the time for a full segment, but really just need to be said before we close the show down. Okay, so let's go take the news to Ottawa here. Last week, I believe it was last week, Jagmeet Singh walks in front of the cameras and says, "I'm ripping up my agreement with Justin Trudeau. I am done being his patsy. Justin Trudeau's a bad guy. Doesn't matter that I've been responsible for keeping him in power for the last 2+ years here. He's a bad guy. I'm against him. We're ripping it up." That changes the dynamics because then all of a sudden Pierre Poilievre, to no one's surprise, says, "Oh, well, let's see if you really mean it. Do you really? If you ripped it up, that means you saying you don't have confidence in Justin Trudeau. Well, let's vote on a motion of non-confidence, shall we?" So Pierre Poilievre has indicated he's introducing a plain motion of non-confidence, just simple language. And Justin Trudeau has been forced to find a new dancing partner. And, well, he may have broken up with Jagmeet, but he looked at the other end of the dance hall. And there is Yves Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc-Québécois. And God, sometimes I wish we had our bloc out west, because they are ruthlessly pragmatic. He says, we don't care who the prime minister is, but we want to squeeze the government we want to squeeze the west of Canada as much as we can for the profit of Quebec. Yeah, it's cynical, but good God. I think only the Bloc Québécois speaks about how Canada really is. None of the Federalist parties will talk this way and actually talk about the truth of how transactional Canadian federalism is. We're a corporation at this point. It's purely transactional. And the Bloc understands this the way no one else does, and they say it out loud. So God bless them. So it was announced today, the Bloc Québécois will not be voting non-confidence in Justin Trudeau. And their price has been only a few, I don't know the exact amount, but it'll amount to roughly $5 billion a year in perpetuity by increasing the OAS, which will disproportionately benefit Quebec. That's a Bloc Québécois bill that needs Liberal support to pass. So, Nigel, do you think is this just a one-off, or do you think we're seeing the beginning of maybe the new, maybe not long-term dancing partner, but medium-term dancing partner for the Liberals?
The Prime Minister needs the Bloc to get him to the next election. Theoretically in October of 2025, constitutionally possibly in October 2026.
That one won't happen, but yeah.
I love it when you say that will never happen, because
But then it does.
Then it
because this is Canada.
This is Canada. It could happen. And for viewers,
they'll never invoke the War Measures Act to deal with some bouncy castles.
For viewers who are not familiar with it, the Constitution does permit 5 years between elections. We have run on 4 years between elections as being appropriate for the last 40 years.
Mulroney went to 5.
Did he go to
that
5?
was in a case of a majority government, and that was before we had fixed election date legislation. So nothing stops under the fixed election date legislation. The Prime Minister can call an early election, especially if he has a minority, because then he has an excuse. But to go past 4 years, you would need to repeal the fixed election date.
Well, they've already done that once.
That was for their pensions. They moved it back by a week.
Yes.
But they would have to outright repeal it to go to 5 years.
Well, they could do that. I mean,
they could.
Alberta had a balanced budget act too.
But I think, really...
we had a fixed election date law, and it didn't mean anything to Jim Prentice.
Yeah. The thing that really makes it hard to talk about this with compassion is that here we have the Liberal government, the most unpopular government I think that we have seen in this country since the Kim Campbell government, and they are staving off certain defeat by making an alliance with who? The party that wants to break Canada up, the Bloc Québécois, the party. So, it reminds me of 2008 when there was that coalition of interest between the Bloc, the NDP, and the Liberals to bring down the Harper government. In the end, they were called on that very thing. How can you make this depend on the participation of separatists? Answer, you can't. They backed off, but now they're doing it. It's a shameful day.
I don't know. Minority governments have operated with the support of the Bloc in the past, including Stephen Harper's. Now, those were always one-off deals, and this does not appear to be a coalition of the informal kind, like it was between, until Jagmeet Singh ripped up his deal with Justin Trudeau with much fanfare, or the formal coalition that had been proposed in, I think, was it 2008?
Yes.
Yeah, 2008-9. Yeah, between 2008-9, kind of went over that period. This is more akin to, I think, when Harper worked with the Bloc, but it's
a qualitative difference. I mean, here is we will back you for a year, give us money. Harper, I need your support today. Okay.
Well, no. I don't think we've seen a written agreement with the Bloc that's equivalent to, say, with the way the Liberals had to deal with the NDP.
Well, I don't think they're going to show it to you anyway.
No. Perhaps they achieve an informal understanding, because Jagmeet Singh, Cory, has been humiliated. No one like even his own supporters were kind of face palming a bit about, his bravado that I'm ripping up the agreement. He sounded like a frog. Rip it, rip it, rip it, rip it. Like the talking points were absurd after he spent so long backing Trudeau. Jagmeet Singh has been humiliated for over 2 years in his position. He cannot back the Liberals again in the first confidence vote that comes up, the Conservative putting forward here. I don't think the Bloc intends to be a permanent fixture in the government the way the NDP has been for the last 2+ years. I think they are looking for kind of one-off transactional deals so that when the next election comes, they can say, here's what we accomplished. Because the biggest knock against the Bloc in Quebec is generally that, well, you can't be a part of the government, you can't deliver the goods. This is a way for them to turn around and say, here's how we delivered the goods, you would have never got it without the Bloc. And they're coming off a fresh by-election win just yesterday. Where do you think the Bloc is at strategically in this?
Well, actually, they're kind of similar to where Singh was. They're both parties that know that they'll never be anything more powerful than being in a kingmaker position. I believe that Poilievre is going to try and get a confidence vote whenever possible. And when that happens, the Bloc's going to come forward and say to Trudeau, if you want to stay in, you've got to do something for us. And something that's different this time is the Bloc is well placed to go into the next election. Jagmeet Singh never was. I mean, he was, they're not a well-funded party. They're not going to do any better than where they're sitting right now. As you said, the Bloc has just come off of a by-election win. They're not afraid to go to the polls. So their threats of saying we will support a non-confidence motion are real. And that really puts Trudeau over a barrel when it comes to those negotiations.
And the really strengthening their hand today was winning that by-election in Verdun something on the island of Montreal. That seat has been continuously Liberal for 40 years. Before that, it may have been PC or something at some point. But it's never been a Bloc seat. The Bloc has never been particularly competitive on the island of Montreal. They just took... This is the Quebec equivalent of the Toronto St. Paul's seat. The Liberals are losing their very, very safest seats. They're losing the keep of the castle. And the Bloc just took that from them. So they have a lot of leverage right now. The Liberals are terrified of an election. And I think they'll do anything to avoid one. And that's a powerful point. That's a very salient point you made, Cory, that the NDP have always been terrified of election. They had no money. They literally just paid off their campaign debt. They have no money in the bank. They're low in the polls. They're going to lose seats. The Bloc stands to gain seats. They got money in the bank. They're doing decently in the polls. But they also know that they have more leverage in a minority government than in a majority. And they've already said, Pierre Poilievre's going to win the next election. He's got it in the bag. He's going to have a majority government. So we're in no rush to give up our leverage.
Yeah, and I mean but they will in a heartbeat if they don't get what they're asking for.
Yeah,
and hopefully Trudeau knows it. I mean, what he knows and doesn't know is.
Well, I think Mr. Trudeau is very well aware of how much he is going to have to pay the Bloc in one way or another to stay in that position for another 12 months. What could he possibly not understand?
Well, and I mean, the thing that gets me though is, I was tormented by question period in the newsroom today, and I listened to Trudeau get up there and give his stock lines on the carbon tax and everything else. He sounds exactly though. He's giving the exact same line he did in the House of Commons that he did a year ago. He won't change his tune. He's incapable of changing his tune. Even though he's this low in the polls, tells me that this is a man who really doesn't know how precarious his position is.
But Cory, you sort of misunderstand the purpose of those dumb lines. It is not to inform, it is merely to get through the hour.
Yeah.
And
treading water.
All he has to do is say something and make it sound good. And that's all that is required of him.
Well, the Liberals just had their caucus retreat in Nanaimo, where we had Western State reporter Jared Yager out there. And the conclusion the Liberals came to address their low numbers is, drumroll, more Justin Trudeau. The reason Canadians don't love Justin right now is because they just haven't had enough of him for the 9 years. We just don't
understand him right.
Yeah. So
Canadians need to engage more, right?
Yes, Canadians need to engage more. That's why they lost the by-elections. Okay. Well, we're going to move it on now. So this is one of my favorite headlines in a long time. From the liver to the knees. So Israel's pager assassination program. I mean, if the Jews had been in charge of the CIA, they would have got Castro. They would have castrated Castro. I mean, we're going to roll some of my favorite memes and Photoshops and videos going aside. But, I mean, gentlemen, you've probably seen some of the security footage coming out of Lebanon of some Hezbollah guy, and he's at the grocery checkout counter, and all of a sudden his midsection disappears. It's, you know, I mean, there are rules to war, and doing that kind of thing would normally, I'd be like, even to the worst kind of guys, I'd be like, I don't know. That's a little much. But then I was reminded yesterday that these guys brag about rape. They love rape. They use rape on an industrial scale as a weapon of war. So you know what? I think it's quite apropos that the Israeli... we'll just back out to the story for a second. Maybe I got ahead of myself. The Israeli government, I guess, intercepted these pagers from I think they're from like a Taiwanese company.
And then in Budapest, they're assembling or manufacturing them or something.
And then they got modified. Maybe they took out a bit of memory, a bit of RAM, and they put in some C4. And all of a sudden, there's a Twitter account you were talking about before we started the show.
The Mossad satirical account, which is a comms branch of Mossad. They have inside info so quickly. It's quite it's humorous.
And then I guess literally as all these pagers were going off, that account tweeted, "Boom, beep."
That's it. Just beep. You said, what the heck are they tweeting about beep? And then so suddenly the Twitter scroll starts because suddenly Hezbollah members are going off like firecrackers through Syria. And Lebanon.
Yeah. So Cory, I guess let's back up to the point I was making. That I mean. It's covert operations. There's going to be assassinations. I mean, it's a dirty business, but all governments engage in it. The Israeli government, under particular threat, engages in it maybe more than others, but they're under more threat than others. My initial reaction was a bit of a chuckle at these guys, but then I thought, I don't know. I mean, for the guys who survive it, that's a particularly nasty meaning. But then I thought, these are people who particularly delight in industrial scale rape.
This is everything that people supposedly been demanding of Israel for a long time. Israel's been getting hundreds and hundreds of rockets sent weekly from Hezbollah out of Lebanon into residential areas that they're constantly having to battle off and fight off. They're completely indiscriminate about who they kill in Israel. Mm-hmm. If Israel dares to have any collateral damage and a defense retaliation, they get pilloried.
This was pretty targeted.
I've never seen nobody's ever seen anything as brilliantly targeted as this, where it only hit Hezbollah combatants. Yeah, it hit a certain part of them, but it hit them.
They'll have trouble penetrating Israel or anything now.
Yes, exactly. But I mean, what do you want Israel to do? That because Israel could launch missiles and artillery straight into Beirut if they wanted. They could turn it into glass if they wanted.
Could flatten Beirut tomorrow.
This was a brilliant move. It terrified the other remaining Hezbollah. They don't know what to trust now. The walkie-talkies are blowing up on them.
Yeah.
Nobody aside from a Hezbollah member was using a pager in the last 20 years.
Yeah, that was my very first reaction. Are you sure it was pagers blowing up? Like who's using pagers?
And that really helped because they're analog, and they realized they've been getting tracked by their digital phones, and of course being nailed by drones. So they said, "Well, let's go analog now. Israel can't track us." Except some smart people in Israel figured out that if we just hit the pagers, nobody else is using them. It was a brilliant tactical move. Plus the other aspect, I don't know how far down the rabbit hole we want to go, but an injured soldier is far more devastating in a war than a dead one because they have to be treated. They have to be taken care of. They walk around crippled or handicapped or mutilated as a reminder to everybody else of what can happen. It's demoralizing. It was a brilliant tactical strategy from a country that's been getting it from all sides. Just, don't join Hezbollah and your balls won't get blown off.
Nigel, it's a nasty move. It's a nasty move. I don't think it could happen to much more deserving people than Hezbollah or Hamas, but it's a nasty move.
Well, it is. And we've played it light, as we should.
It's hard not to chuckle at that.
But, I would just say this to anybody who feels strongly that somehow the Israelis have done something. We're assuming it's the Israelis. Who else would it be? That they have done something rather nasty, especially nasty. Look at those images from October the 7th again, and you will see what nasty really looks like. The women bleeding from the, it's just awful, awful stuff. We have no idea what those hostages have suffered in the past year. Some who have been released seem to have come through it okay. The ones who are still there, hard to know, but my word, I have no sympathy. I just can't work up the sympathy. This was deserved.
Yeah. I've been trying to be sympathetic. I've been trying to have sense of balance, and then I just have a hard time feeling bad for these guys.
It puts out some messaging that maybe even these guys will get. I mean, it's been happening since the Olympic atrocities in the past. Israel has a long memory. They're very patient. They're very meticulous.
Put that bloody thing away, Derek.
No, I am.
And they're gonna get you if it takes them years.
So
or whatever,
I'm reading here from the Mossad Satirical and Awesome. It's this is the account you were talking about. You just reminded me. They tweeted. The International Olympic Committee announced today that hundreds of Hezbollah fighters now qualified to compete in women's boxing.
That's right.
I mean, that's taking a few shots all in one.
Or a castrati choir. I mean, the high-pitched voices in Lebanon now must be something else.
Yes. They can, yeah. It's, in some ways, that's worse than death.
Well,
it's worse than death in some ways, especially if you fancy yourself a martyr. Like, because, these guys, martyr culture, getting your 71, is it 71 or 72 versions?
72.
72?
Yeah.
Okay. I only got 71. I got cheated.
And it's virgins, right? Not Virginians.
That's right. Maybe it is Virginians. That would be another great irony.
I mean, it's, depends which translation you're looking at. You got George Washington Jefferson kicking you for it.
That is the most humorous part, but some of them really did name them other ways, actually, which is, again, it's war, it's ugly. But a lot of them, the first thing they did when it beeped, because I guess took up, was they picked it up if they could and get it off, and they held it so a lot were blinded because it went off in their face.
Yeah.
But again, these were small charges. Aside
They wouldn't
from a
be very
couple of
big
cases,
bombs,
they weren't blowing up whole rooms. They weren't the reduced, not zero collateral damage, but reduced was outstanding as far as an active war like this goes. When you can take 3,000 combatants out with only a handful of other individuals harmed, that's amazing.
But you know what this is? Okay, I'm going to get in trouble for going down this rabbit hole because some of it's semantics, but we've been wrestling with the issue especially since 9/11, of defining what is terrorism. And generally terrorism is bad violence committed by the other guy. Our side never engages in terrorism, and well, that's not true. I'd say terrorism is a flexible concept, but I generally define it as an act of political violence where the act of violence is where the psychological effect is disproportionate to the actual act of violence. 9/11 killed a lot of people, but the psychological effect was no different than an atomic bomb dropping. This was smart, but it terrorized the terrorists. They are now, pardon my French, they're crap in their pants.
Well, they don't know where to go.
Like, how can they? Okay, well, we have to stop using cell phones because they were tracking us, so they use this, and then they literally blew their midsections off.
And the walkie-talkies, when they switched to those blew up too.
Yeah.
So now they really don't. Somebody said, they got to watch their digital toasters now.
Yeah. So it is putting terror in the hearts of terrorists, and that is smarter than simply killing your enemy. And that's what the West often does: is say, okay, here's the bad guys, eliminate them.
This is
you have to put terror into them.
But a little bit, just on the definition of terrorist too, though, is a terrorist is indiscriminate with who they target. In fact, they might go out of their way to target civilians. That's what I mean. They hit a music festival. They hit young ladies. People can accept combatants hitting combatants.
Terrorism can also be against the military target. We tend to think of it as targeting civilians, but
depending on what you did. If you lined them all up and slowly castrated them, that would certainly be an act of terrorism.
Well, look, but I'm trying to use it in a non-judgmental term. That terror is and has always been a tool of warfare.
Yeah, and there's a strong psychological aspect to this attack.
And the West is very careful about not using it too much. This terrorizes them.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was a good thing.
As a disincentive, as I said, for up and coming terrorists, when they see their uncle, waddling around missing his parts, maybe law school looks a little better than joining Hezbollah. Actually,
Meanwhile, small boys will make a fortune carrying letters by bicycle from one house.
That's
to
what they're
another.
down to now.
Well, they're going to go pigeons.
Well,
And the Israelis will find a way to make the pigeons explode. Okay. All right. Well, let's move on. Also speaking of rearranging the midsection. Jennifer Johnson. She was elected as the MLA here in Alberta for Lacombe-Ponoka. And she had won the UCP nomination in that riding. She was the UCP candidate during the election. I don't recall exactly what she said, but she said something very clumsily that came across very poorly. Yeah. I don't think it was intended the way it became spun, but she said it, and she played the political price for it. Danielle Smith, to kind of save the rest of the ticket, said, well, if this person's elected, she'll have to sit as an independent, not with the UCP. So she's been sitting as an independent since. And, they essentially said, well, for the party to take you back, bring you into the caucus, you have to neutralize yourself as a political risk to us. That means going out and doing essentially, long story short, sensitivity training, earning some endorsements from sexual minority communities, etc. She's been out doing that. But someone from the trans community really, really overplayed their hand with a video. I don't know if it happened yesterday or if just the video came out yesterday. But let's roll at least a clip of this video of Jennifer Johnson being re-educated.
I'm going to throw it over to Victoria now, and she'll just touch on a little bit more about that.
Hi, Jennifer. I really want to thank you for meeting with us today and taking the time to try to signal that this is more of a priority for you.
Absolutely. Delighted to meet with you all.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Before I would ever say, though, that this was a productive meeting and be counted to the list of contacts that you've reached out to in the queer community, I have to know a few things of where you sit. Will you state on the record right now that trans women are women?
I've never been asked that before.
Will you say that on the record right now?
No, I want to have some time to think on that.
Okay, well, that's me. Have a great day. And I will be speaking out against this meeting because you are clearly not ready to have this. So I'm not going to be added to the list of meetings that you are going to have with people where you say, well, I met this person and this person, because no. You can't say I've had these consultations and use that as justification for you to work your way back into caucus, which is why we know you're really here. This only happens. This meeting is only happening because you're on Twitter, in the Twitter sphere, and people are debating whether or not you're going to be led back into caucus, and Premier Smith is debating that. And so you need to do some PR work. And I'm not going to be your Band-Aid. I'm not going to be your pink washing unless you can tell me right now that you believe that I, as a trans woman, right now, right here, am a woman. Then we don't have a lot to work on here. You want to talk about listening to the community? If you can't start with that basic foundational principle that we are who we say we are in our bones, then I don't think we're on the same page for working forward. So I'll give you one last chance. Are trans women women? Will you say that on the record right now?
Victoria, we can disagree on things. And
not on that. Not on my identity. No. Not on that.
And I can still care about you, even if we disagree.
Wonderful. But I will be speaking out against this meeting 100% if you can't say that right now, because I'm not going to have you add my name to the list of meetings that you've had to show that you're, quote, doing the work, because you're not doing the work. The work is the inner work. You're learning the outer work. You're learning what you're allowed to say in public and what you're not, so you don't get in this situation again, because you got caught saying what you really thought. And you did think that. But you haven't shown that you've changed. Because if you can't respect us, then how can I work with you? If you don't believe that I am a woman sitting right here, right now, how on earth are you saying that you're working with me? What work have you done then if you can't start with, yes, Victoria, you are a woman?
Can we disagree and still respect each other?
No. Goodbye.
Okay. So what you saw there was a biological male, XY chromosomes, demanding that Jennifer Johnson, evidently a woman, a real woman, demanding that she say something that she does not believe to be true. I would assume so. She was extremely professional and calm and courteous. She showed no ill will towards this trans person. She was actually remarkably polite, and to use perhaps the wrong term, gentlemanly in the face of this berating.
Could we not say ladylike?
Ladylike, yeah, that's what I was.
Just grasping for words here.
I was looking for. I was like, I know gentlemanly is the wrong term. Thank you for that intervention.
That was, you keep me around.
Yeah. So and then J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, said that this is a man bullying a woman. So very rare that a big international figure like J.K. Rowling chimes in on local Alberta politics in Lacombe and Ponoka. I did not have that on my bingo card for news of the week, but that's what happened. I'll start with you, Nigel. I think she was eventually going to be let into the UCP. I guess we can't say back in because she never actually sat at the UCP. She was technically elected as an independent, but it said Conservative on the ballot because it was too late to change it. It seems to me that this bully who tried to force her to lie and say something she did not believe to be true in public has probably helped her. And I at this point, you and I are still working our sources on the UCP side. I think Smith and the UCP caucus have to let her back in now. I think at their next meeting, she's going to be coming out of that as a UCP MLA.
I would certainly hope that you are correct on that, Derek. The matter of what she actually said is quite hard to uncover now because the news reports are all by agencies which we identify as mainstream, and they are therefore tend to take a pro-gay, pro-trans interpretation of everything. But as much as I can say, the discussion was how well the Alberta education system was doing. But she was making the point that we've got children identifying as cats, and the teacher puts a litter box in the classroom for them. And then she went on to talk about, to make the comparison of feces in, like, we're doing so great, but we have these weak spots. It's like feces in your cookie dough. Metaphor is a very dangerous thing in political rhetoric, and this one was like an exploding pager for her. So she has paid the price on that and more.
It was at the very least a very clumsy way of expressing herself.
It was. However, I think most people who know her know that she's actually a pretty decent person, and that came through on the video. But there's a larger point that and you actually laid it out very well when you introduced this subject, when you said that she was being told by this individual to say something that she did not believe as the price of continuing as a public person.
Continuing on her apology to her.
So this is actually what is happening to all of us on a national scale, here in Canada, down south in the United States, over in Great Britain to excess, all over Europe. We're being told to believe things that we know in our hearts, and we know from the education that we receive, are simply not true. And that individual asked Jennifer Johnson to say, you, although you were born a man, are actually a woman. And in all conscience, she felt she couldn't say that. I would never agree to that.
She just politely said, I haven't thought about it. No one's asked me that before. So she was very polite. She didn't tell her off. She wasn't mean in responding. She was ladylike.
But this is a microcosm in that little interchange of what is going on right across the country, and not just in the area of sexuality. Even the Prime Minister says, if a man says he's a woman, he's a woman. Well,
if a man says he's a woman, she is a woman.
Perhaps
watch your language.
Perhaps he even said that. But at any rate,
I can't believe we haven't been pulled off of cable yet.
you know,
like I'm shocked
well,
the CRTC.
the Online Harms Act the regulations will be devised.
Yeah, but we're on cable too. It's just a matter of time until they come for us. But
well, let's not wish it upon ourselves. But anyway, but she's actually carrying the fight for all of us.
yeah, Cory, I really hadn't actually thought much about Jennifer Johnson too much until last night when I saw this. She's kept an extremely low profile. And I think that was, I can imagine that, after the last election, the UCP brass sat her down and they're like, okay, well, we want to bring you home, but it's going to be a while. And here's the stations of the cross you're going to have to go through to get there. And you're going to have to be very quiet so that when we bring you back, you're going to be very quiet and you're going to have endorsements from some of these groups so that when you come back, there's some cover and the party doesn't take a hit for it. Okay. I think that ended yesterday because this person, I think this actually goes, let's bring it up to a macro level here. The reason the pendulum, I think, is swinging so hard against the radical woke side is because they never actually convinced anyone of their arguments. They imposed false consensus on society. They bullied people. They silenced people. They didn't engage in conversation and change hearts and minds on a mass scale. They had their hardcore that believes this already. And then everyone else, they just, if you disagreed, they just yell whatever the latest excommunicatory label is. Racist, sexist, homophobe, transphobe, ism, that. That doesn't convince anybody. And this biological male who was trying to bully her into compliance was just doing the way they've been doing things for the last decade or so in the heyday of the woke era. And we saw it here, and it happens to be in 2024, the year of the pushback, as the pendulum swings back the other way. So
this dude will probably end up in the Senate. You realize that?
Oh, God, you're probably right. But Cory, do you think that video, I think in the absence of that video, she was probably at least waiting a while longer. I think that video coming out yesterday and the professional way in which she comported herself, and the fact that actually her runner-up in the UCP nomination there, Dusty, I don't recall the last name, but Dusty, that was a hot nomination. There were hurt feelings. This was a nasty nomination. He came out today and said, Jennifer Johnson needs to go to the UCP caucus. This is someone who's not her friend. This is not someone who feels vested in her political success. I think all of a sudden this has become a political imperative that Smith and the UCP caucus have got to bring her home. They got to do it fast.
Yeah, they got to put this bullying to an end. And it's not unprecedented. Yeah, I believe it's while you were in the legislature during the Deborah Drever thing. Mm-hmm. Deborah Drever was an NDP MLA. Very shortly after being elected, it was found she'd made some social media comments that are these days considered homophobic.
Well, actually, she was sworn in as an independent. She was elected as a Democrat.
So it was even that
from the very beginning, because those comments came in out days after the election.
Very similar, anyways. And she had to do her penance in the legislature for a couple of years and say she'd done this and done that.
Not as long as Johnson's had.
No, but she was brought back in, and they said, okay, she's apologized. And in both cases, we're not talking about people who had a serial pattern of making those statements. These were one-offs that the hysteria got going over. I mean, if Johnson had years of constantly railing and rallying or insulting or something, then it's a little more difficult. If they don't bring her back in, they're making every other MLA in their caucus vulnerable to this sort of thing. There's going to be the woke who feel that they should be life sentences for one misconstrued or poorly phrased or even insensitive statement. And you can't bow to them. You cannot, because once you allow that to happen, they're going to want to ruin more political careers. And I think the UCP is cognizant of this, and it's time. There's no better time than now. You're a couple of years from the next election. Let them have their furor. Let them stomp their feet, and it's going to be pretty much forgotten, presuming that Ms. Johnson doesn't do anything to get in trouble again.
Well, I think this inoculated her. I think, and this is better than her coming in from a groveling apology to her, which seemed that she was kind of being forced to do. Yeah. And I get the political reasons for it, but it was icky. It It was icky. I don't like it. Gave me a bad feeling. But I think you're very right, Cory. They have to bring her in now to protect everyone else, because they need to stand up against this kind of bullying, intimidation, where someone, in very 1984 fashion, says, tell me, it's noon right now. Tell me it's midnight. Yeah. And look me in the eyes and convince me that you believe it. We're going to force you to lie and say something that we all know you do not believe to be true. That kind of intimidation and silencing.
They're overplaying their hand. Like I'm a libertarian-minded person, and out of respect for another, if it, I take it case by case, like other things. Yeah. If an individual presents to me, they've been trying very hard to appear in the gender they are. That's what they feel, and they ask, "Could you please refer to me as such?" You know what?
If they're respectful and they're not,
if it's some dude who stuck on some earrings, says 5 o'clock shadow and a bulge in his pants, and saying, "Call me a woman." No, I won't. I'm sorry. You're a man who's made a token effort of seeking attention or something. Mm-hmm. I will distinguish between what I think are ones that garner my respect and others. I won't be bullied.
I make the call always just depending on the attitude of the person. If the person is respectful and treats me like a decent human being, I will do the same to them. Even if I don't believe they are a woman, I just don't care enough. I'll just be polite and call you by what you like.
But it all depends on the circumstance.
It depends on the circumstance. Yeah. The case of this dude, that is not a respectful person. That is not someone who deserves deference in return. That's not someone I'm going to call man. All right. Parting shots. This is our first time doing it. We only can generally pick 3, maximum 4 if we really squeeze it in on the show. Rather than try to squeeze in a 4th topic, parting shots is going to be our new way we're going to try out of being able to bring something up that's maybe gotten missed in the news or just didn't get quite the attention it deserves. And you want to just make a parting shot before we wrap up the show. So, Nigel, first parting shot to you.
I take it. One of the unfortunate circumstances of my life here is that we have that TV with question period on right by my desk. And
I can see it through the studio window.
I have to listen to Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland, who has perhaps the most irritating voice of any prominent politician. And yesterday she was trying to explain that we should all be glad because inflation has been brought down to 2%. And it has been as high as 7 in the last 3 years. Well, good. Glad it's down to 2%. But here's the thing. Because I'm the kind of person I am, I actually saved till slips knowing that it would come in handy one day. So I went to Costco and I have 3 years of till slips, and I have traced the progress of prices of individual items that my wife and I actually buy, as opposed to some fancy thing that Statistics Canada puts together. Mm-hmm. We are up from $100 to $130, and now we're up to $132. I am not pleased with the Liberal record on inflation one bit.
Wow. Parting shot. All right, Cory, here for your parting shots.
Sure, just a quick shot just on the standards of legacy media. I torment myself listening to the radio on the way in sometimes. I won't bother saying which show. Premier Smith announced the big announcement of a massive, $9 billion in funding for schools and infrastructure. And listening to the guest and host on a particular show twisting themselves in knots to try and explain why this is a negative thing. We don't have the staff to fill these schools. We don't have the ability to keep up with them. Like, can they not? Just at least for a change, say she did something that needed to be done. There's plenty of other things to critique, but they will never take a second even to give a little bit of credit. And I'm just sick and tired of it.
As good practice, when I was at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation dealing with, the Alison Redford government, I hated 99% what they did. But when they did the 1% I liked, I made sure to note it because it made me sound more reasonable when I went after the other 99. And if you can't be that gracious to your opponents, I think it makes you a lot less credible. All right, my parting shot. Speaking of my old employer, Canadian Taxpayers Federation, they're going after Nenshi right now, trying to get him to make a clear position and statement on the carbon tax. He's had some wishy-washy positions. He's not been firmly for it. But he also hasn't been firmly against it either. We've now seen really beginning with when the Liberals brought in the exemption for home heating fuel to essentially give Atlantic Canada a break on the carbon tax, but not anyone else. The consensus around the carbon tax following, we went from the last election, even the Conservatives ran pro-carbon tax under Aaron O'Toole, to now even the NDP are, at least on paper, against the carbon tax. David Eby's NDP government in British Columbia, sort of against the carbon tax, saying, well, if Pierre Poilievre wins, we'll get rid of our carbon tax too. Nenshi has had some statements around it in an interview he did on West of Center, a podcast, CBC, where he said, we'll definitely have the industrial carbon tax, thinking that that's a given. I hope it's not a given, but okay. But on the consumer carbon tax, he had very wishy. He just said, well, I'm not sure if there's like political license for it. If there's political license for it, we'll have maybe a very wishy-washy statement. So the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is trying to get Nenshi to come on the record for it. Anytime Nenshi has spoken to reporters and been asked about it, he's not been very clear. That's a position I think he's going to have to take soon. And considering that if the British Columbia socialists have now turned against the carbon tax, I would imagine that Naheed Nenshi leading the Alberta socialists is probably going to have to side with, to use a leftist term, the direction of history and get on board with where things are going, which is no more carbon tax. That's my parting shot.
Amen.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining today.
Good.
And thank all of you for joining us on this edition of The Pipeline. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, you really must be. The Western Standard is one of an extremely small number of the remaining independent media left in Canada that do not take Justin Trudeau's federal media bailout subsidy. We are supported by advertising and membership subscriptions from people like you. Please go to westernstandard.news right now. Click on subscribe. It's only $10 a month or $100 a year, and you'll get unlimited access past the paywall to all Western Standard content, and you'll be supporting one of the last free media outlets left north of the border. Thank you very much for being here today, and God bless.
If the name Ted Byfield brings back fond memories, well, we got a party coming up for you guys. On September 25th, Toasting Ted is what it's called. It's going to honor a great conservative who published Alberta Report news magazine. It's going to be bagpipes, singing, live auction stakes, speeches by Premier Smith, Preston Manning, Stephen Harper, quite a lineup. The Western Standard is the final incarnation or the latest incarnation of Alberta Report that Ted Byfield founded. And I mean, he was a great Albertan. He really made his mark on this province. And this evening of celebration for him is really going to be outstanding. You get there, toastingted.ca. That's the website. You can get your tickets. This one's going to sell out. I mean, again, if you want to see Smith, Manning, Harper, all in one spot, one night, be sure to get there.
You can become a Western Standard member for just $10 a month or $99 a year for unlimited access